All right, welcome back to the show. This is Tom or Robots, and I have a very, very special episode this week. We are wrapping up October, and October is, of course, wonderful because of spooky stuff, and I love having guests on the shows in order to talk about all the spooky things that are going on in the games that we discuss and their perspectives on this. But who better to have in a show where we're talking about a lot of the spooky elements, especially in Bethesda games like Fallout and Elder Scrolls, but one of the guys who put some of the spookiest stuff in those games, the mind that created these hellscapes, or at least spooky environments, we'll call them. Nate Purkeypile is back. Welcome back, Nate. How is it going?
It's going good. It's incredibly busy since I'm shipping a game as a solo dev, but it's going great.
Yeah. So it's been a little while since I've had the chance to talk to you on one of my shows. And I think the last time we talked, it was 2 or 3 years ago. You had recently left Bethesda, and I'm going to give you a moment here to remind everybody about all the different hats you've worn, because you've done a lot of things over like 14 years with that company, right? It's been a while, but you decided to head off on your own. You were inspired to create this heavy metal hunting mythology sort of spooky game. I'm going to let you describe it in your words. And I've dabbled in the demo because the demo's out now. And as of the recording of this, the game hasn't actually launched yet, but it is going to launch in a few days. So by the time you're listening to this, the Axis Unseen will be available. So let's just start off with your background and some of the roles that you had at Bethesda and where you kind of got your start with some of these ideas that I think are probably worked their way into your own game here.
Yeah, so I started during Fallout 3, and I built lots of the cities in there, like little lamplight and a lot of caves, did a lot of lighting. But then I was, lead artist and co-lead on Point Lookout and also the Pit. But Point Lookout, I feel like, is the more important one here, because it's obviously like very horror themed, like the font choices and like lighting and everything. And I was also involved in like the Dunwich building in Fallout 3 and made like the sculpture in the bottom of that.
Yeah.
I worked on Skyrim. I did most of the lighting in Skyrim. I did like the cave kits, Imperial Caves, but I actually rolled off earlier than most people to go into Fallout 4. And I was like the second artist on the project. So I built stuff like Diamond City. Again, most of the lighting, because we didn't have like a lighting team right back then. It was just like half of my job, basically. Right.
Here you go. You do all the lights. Cool.
Right.
Thanks.
And also did, like a bunch of the dungeon kits for that one. Also like the building kits, industrial kits, steam tunnels, all kinds of stuff. Pretty much all the railroad faction art.
Okay.
Then I, again, rolled off earlier than most people to then be the lead artist, basically art director on Fallout 76, which, again, is very clearly horror themed in a lot of ways. Like I picked all of the monsters for that game, and surprise, they're all cryptids.
So that was it your original concept, or was it like the team came up with the concept of cryptids and you were like, yes, this is absolutely my, how did that work?
Well, it kind of came up because Mothman is such a big thing there. And it was one of the first things that came up, like, oh, West Virginia has Mothman. Mothman's so cool. And I was like, Mothman's cool, but what if we like take this angle on all of the new creatures? Because debatably, like, it's not actually even what that name is. Like, Mothman isn't necessarily Mothman. It's a mutated moth, right? So you can just take that angle of people describing things in the terms that they're more or less used to.
Right.
And I thought it was fitting just for having a nice horror theme to everything, just with like the big open woods and stuff. I grew up in the middle of the woods and constantly thinking about monsters, so it was very fitting to me.
Right. Yeah. There is something scary about the woods. There definitely, especially at night when you hear things, but you can't see them. Yeah.
It's a very valid concern. Like in my house, there was I forgot if I mentioned this on the last time I was here, but there was like a bear pelt hanging up from a bear that my dad killed in our backyard.
Yeah.
It's like, it wasn't like this, oh, maybe there's things in the woods. It's like, no, there's like bears out there.
Right. You go out by yourself, you might get hunted by a bear. So that's a very real concern. And that gets your imagination going. I would argue that this is a psychological evolutionary sort of thing where imagining that there's a monster out there hunting you is going to help you survive, whether there is or isn't. And so
Right.
therefore it's one of those things that we as human beings continue to do when most of us live in environments where that's not the case. But yeah, it gets your imagination going. And so you're like, oh, if there's a bear out there, then what else is there out there? You know, is Slender Man slinking between the trees? Like, what is going on? So yeah, I love the cryptids in 76. I love that they continue to expand on that now that you've now moved on from the studio is still continuing that idea that you kind of implanted in that. And then you went from 76 to Starfield, which also on occasion has certain horror or spooky elements to it.
Yeah, after we released Wastelanders, that was basically the last thing on 76 that I was involved in, and like, you know, art directed that also and did most of the lighting for it. And then I asked to move on to Starfield. And so I worked on Neon and some of the dungeon stuff and was like lead lighting artist before I left. But I was only on it for about a year. So, I mean, it's not that I didn't do that much, but
Early days.
yeah. Tools were still being worked on and stuff. There was plenty of work done after I left, basically.
Oh, I'm sure. That game has a long development time, and in 1 year, I've only got so far into it. Wow. So you have all of these different experiences with the Bethesda titles and a lot of the spooky stuff. Like we go back to Fallout 3 and you're talking Dunwich. We're talking like old gods kinds of stuff that just is hinted at. And I get people asking for like, you should do an episode about that. There's probably more there. And it's like, it's a lot of stuff that's just implied. It's
right? True. It's deliberately like not explicit. And that's part of what makes it terrifying, right? Like that one giant creature, I'm forgetting what I called it now, but in 76, it's in that cave hidden off to the side. And like, we don't really talk about it or explain why that thing is there.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff doesn't come up in dialogue with any of the NPCs that you talk to or any of the quest lines. And oftentimes, even in those environments, there's just like little scraps of notes or something like just enough to make you go, huh, something weird was going on here, but not enough to explain what exactly that was or how it even relates to the rest of like the lore of the game, you know, like, the Fallout covers lots of different kinds of topics and has lots of inspiration across lots of different movies and games and things that inspired it. And so of course you've got aliens and you've got mutants and all of these other things, but then this idea that like, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's other stuff going on somehow that we just don't even really have much of a sense at all. I love that quality. And I also like the fact that it doesn't get explained, or like the Dwemer in Elder Scrolls, right? Like there's this sense of like, there's more going on here, but we don't know what it is and it may never get explained. And I kind of hope that that's the case because it's when that stuff is just in your imagination that it is more scary.
Yeah, it's nice to have that layer. And I think that's part of what makes Fallout such a fun IP to work with. Like people ask me if I ever got bored of it because I worked on it for like 10 years of that time.
Yeah.
And honestly, not really. I really like it because there's so much flexibility in a Fallout game that you can almost do anything. Like there's some limits there and you want to have some restraint, but like, are there ghosts? Maybe.
Right.
Are there ancient gods? Maybe.
Right. Yeah. There could be. Some people think there is, you know, like your character might engage with something, but then you're going to be left with more questions than you have answers. Yeah. So let's talk about how these experiences, the designs of these different details from Fallout and Elder Scrolls and Starfield have influenced where you decided to go with the Axis Unseen. Because it's like one of the descriptions that I've heard around is you take the Stealth Archer build from like an Elder Scrolls game and you stick it in a, I don't know, this world where monsters are kind of leaking into the real world or you're kind of adventuring into their world or whatever. And you can go into more details on that because I don't know how the whole thing plays out because I've only tried the demo. But like how does that work? Like what inspirations did you go, okay, this is definitely something I want to put in my game, or was it more of a subconscious thing? How does that work?
Well, I mentioned like the flexibility of an IP, and that's kind of how I ended up at that spot, because the very, very first idea that I ever had written down for this game was like hunting in hell. Because I was like, oh, that would be pretty sweet, like hunting demons and stuff. But I was like, that's like actually really restrictive. And there's all this lore about what it actually is supposed to be. And then you're kind of like locked into this one thing. But then I just really like this idea of shared myths where there's all these things around the world. Like everybody has their Bigfoot myth. And I was like, that's really weird.
Yeah.
Like, why?
Yeah. Right.
But then there's also stories of things like the World Tree or other world where there's this like world that's right next to ours, outside of it, connecting all these spaces. And so like to me, it like ties those two ideas together where there is this world outside of our own, but that's where these monsters come from and then leak out into the real world. And that's why people have these shared myths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like this kind of idea shows up on occasion. You have aspects of this even in Dungeons and Dragons with like, you know, the different realms and then things leaking through realms. You get an inspiration in mythology with, for example, the Norse, where you have like Midgard is where the humans live. But then there's Elfheim and there's like these other realms with other creatures and sometimes they leak through. Heck, in Marvel they use this, or Buffy the Vampire Slayer with like the Hellmouth, right? Isn't the Hellmouth kind of the same concept here?
Yeah, I feel like it's just kind of like this inevitable spot you end up when you're talking about monsters and like, if this was true, how would it work? It's basically like this. It's like the logical conclusion of this kind of illogical, crazy thing.
Right. So I know the story in your game in the Axis Unseen is told through environment a lot. You've got like a journal with some really cool imagery and like documenting details about the monsters as you discover them. You've got kind of this stuff going on. Is it in the actual game itself? Is it explicitly told like a story? Because I know in the demo, and let me detail this for some people. You should go pick up the demo if you're on the fence about it. You're taken through a series of situations, and it's like all of a sudden you warp from one place to another, and then you learn something about, oh, this is how the bow works, and then you warp from one place to another place, and it feels a little bit like a fever dream, and I have a feeling that that's very intentional because of the way you want the setting to play out. So do we get an actual description about like who you are in this world and why you're hunting the monsters? Are the monsters coming towards you? Are they encroaching your reality? Are you going into the portals, seeking them out? Like, how does that all work?
It does get explained a little bit. And to clarify what that intro is, it's essentially, for people who haven't seen it, it's kind of like a playable heavy metal music video / tutorial. That said, like if you miss any of the tutorials, they exist in the main game also. But it is sort of implying what the story is without being explicit about it, because I wanted it to be sort of open to interpretation. But basically, like you're starting the game and everybody's slaughtered in your village. And you're playing as that hunter in the intro, going through trying to like get revenge. But, you know, obviously that ends poorly and you become the actual player in the game to see how you'll do going into this world.
Right.
But it is mostly other journals and stuff that you find of people who have gone through this world. But some of them might have been other hunters or people who got trapped here from all different time periods and stuff. So there's all these different stories you can find out. But anytime you're going to have a story like that of a person who got trapped in the world of the monsters, it's not necessarily going to be an explanation or correct, right? It's going to be their view on things, which might be spot on, or it might just be like someone completely freaked out by monsters or making stuff up. You don't necessarily know, right?
Right.
So you just kind of have to decide what you believe and look at the clues in the world and see if you can figure it out.
So you're playing with the unreliable narrator trope and using that because it would make sense. Like if you are somebody who gets pulled into an alternate dimension, gets hunted by these monsters, and you've been able to survive a few days and you've got a journal with you, you're going to be freaking out. Like you're probably going to be hungry. You're going to be scared. You're lost. You may not have slept well. Your interpretation of the things that you're experiencing could be all over the place. It's very similar to ancient peoples when they started exploring the seas more, and they're like, oh, there be monsters out there. And it's like they saw the back of a humpback whale, but they thought it was much bigger than it actually was. Or you know, they discovered an octopus, but they were like, oh, there's probably a giant one. These are the babies, you know, like that sort of thing, right? They start extrapolating from their experiences in order to build something that's bigger or weirder than it may have actually been. Or the discovery of the platypus. And people are like, what the heck is even this? Europeans hadn't seen
Obviously
platypuses
not true.
before. Right. And they're like, well, that's not a real thing. And it turns out it was. Yeah. So let's talk like real world influences. You're pulling these ideas from fiction and then also from the real world. And like you mentioned, you've got Bigfoot in there, but you also have monsters from different cultures. Can you explain a little bit about that?
I do, yeah, because I did want to have like a sort of global pool of monsters to sell that idea of it connecting everywhere. So some of them are more common that people have seen, but to be frank, that's also to ease people into it a little bit.
Mm.
And I get a little bit weirder and more obscure as you get further and further in.
These are the familiar ones. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the nice inviting forest at first, and people are like, oh, I don't know, it's like nice and sunshine is out and there's beautiful trees, but I don't know, man, night falls that first time, like the sun's not there anymore, there's a big thunderstorm rolls in. Even just that is getting terrifying, but then it gets way darker. Way weirder.
It gets way weirder from there. Okay. So is there like let's talk about some of the game mechanics, because we'll get into the hunting stuff, but you mentioned the weather and the sun changing. Is there like a day-night cycle that perpetuates the whole time? Do you have to sleep? How does the weather affect things? Is that random? Like, how does all that work?
Yeah, so there is the day and night cycle, and it's kind of similar to the Fallout games where like night is a bit shorter, just so it's not annoying. Mm-hmm. And then, the weather, each region has its own sets of weathers, and there's different likelihoods of each one happening, and they can all be different lengths. And some creatures can even control the weather and change things.
Okay.
So there's a lot going on there. And I wrote the whole weather system myself, actually, because, I did a bunch of lighting on the Fallout and Skyrim games. So I had a lot of opinions about the way things should work. And to make it look as nice as possible. So having complete control over that was really, really nice.
Yeah. So let's talk about the lighting, because in the demo, there are each of the, you go through all these different scenes, and then you are finally kind of let loose to just kind of explore and do your own thing for a bit. But the environments are, even when they are familiar, because it's like, okay, this is a forest, sometimes the lighting or the color choices feel very intentionally artistic, and they're more about, at least in my experience so far, so correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm only looking through this through the lens of the demo, but it seems like sometimes the situation is less about, hey, this is a real space, feel like this is a real space, and more like, here's a vibe, here's a mood for the scene that you're in. And if you really just take a step back and just look at the colors on your screen, you're going to realize that these colors are more vibrant than anything you're going to see in nature. Like, at least that's the kind of feeling I had. Is that part of the intentionality around that?
Yeah, like I think there's this impulse in horror to be like, it's dark, it's spooky, and everything is like almost grayscale. And it's like that can be fine for some stuff, but I wanted something really exaggerated and over the top where I do use like probably most of the colors.
Yeah.
It varies wildly, and like you don't even go to all the different areas in that intro. So some people play that and they're like, oh, it's kind of like spoil the game. It's like you've not seen a lot. Trust me, there's way more monsters.
Nice. So does the weather system affect your ability to hunt? Because I do know that the monsters can smell you. This isn't just sight, right? There's wind that you can pick up their scent. They can pick up your scent. You want to be like upwind from them or downwind, however that works. Which the one where you can smell them, but they can't smell you.
Right.
Like, does the weather change that? Like if a thunderstorm comes in, does that blow the smelling thing out of the way? You can't smell them now because there's too much rain, or how does that work?
That's one of those things that like overall it is kind of like an immersive sim approach to thing. And like if there's a fire, it will spread in the direction of the wind and stuff. But there are some things like that I had in, but I kind of took it out because it felt weird, or it was like unclear to the player, or not actually fun. Like, speaking of fire, that is one. It's like, oh, well, shouldn't the fires go out quicker? And it's like, there's some areas in the game where it's like raining a lot. So it's kind of not fun. In some cases, I turn that stuff off after playtesting. Same with wind and the bow. Actually, like people are like, oh, does wind affect the arrows? And I turn that off because you'd be like, I missed, this game is bullshit. It's like, actually, it was the wind. Yeah. But you don't want to have to explain that when you're like fighting a werewolf and Bigfoot is on fire and you're like, why did my shot miss?
Right. Ah, crap. I got to pay attention to the leaves while I'm being hunted by these two monsters.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about the hunting part. How does that work? I know you've got your bow, you've got special arrows, you've got like magic stuff that it unlocks. Like, take me through the different ways that you engage with the hunting mechanic.
Yeah, like you said, there is the bow and the elemental arrows, and those can be combined in different ways too. So you like put down a fire, but then if you shoot a wind arrow, it will blow like a wall of fire in that direction.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And then you have your backup melee weapon, right? Because it's kind of annoying to have to pull a bow back if there's a werewolf in your face. So you stab them, and you can get better and better, bows and melee weapons and like all of that. You can upgrade throughout the game, find better stuff. Mm-hmm. But then you have the sense powers, and that's all the things that the creatures are doing to hunt you. You can essentially do over time. Like you can then smell them later and see their scent particles. If something is moving nearby, this tattoo like lights up on your hand. And then there's the magic powers, which is like all the 5 elements. And then each of them have 2 different powers. So there's usually it's kind of like an offense and a defense power. Like the first one you get that you see in the intro, you can like summon a rock pillar. So if there's, giant Bigfoot is running at you, like things that are very tall are fast, right? Because they take big footsteps. So it's really hard to get away from them. But if you summon that rock pillar and get in the way, you can like get a little breathing room. Or you can turn your flesh into stone, because you get knocked into the air a lot in this game, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's this giant boar and it'll just like chuck you up in the air.
All right.
And they're like, what do I do? And you're like, you can turn into like essentially a boulder and then just bacon time. Yeah. Smash it.
So wait, you can land on the monster when you have stone skin and then you do more damage?
Yeah, you crush whatever. You don't get hurt.
That's amazing. That's so cool. I love when mechanics work together and synergize with other mechanics, and it's something that we see in a lot of games in very creative ways. One of the games that I just can't talk about, creepy games, one of the games that I always go back to when I just need something to just play for half an hour, 45 minutes, is The Binding of Isaac, which has been out forever now. And one of the most wonderful things, it's such a simple game on its surface, but all of the upgrades like synergize with all the other upgrades, and so you get these really weird combinations. So I love this idea of like, you set the world on fire in front of you, right? And then you lure the monsters over, and then you just blow the firewall right into the monsters and just start cooking them. Or like in the demo, you create that rock wall. I was using it kind of like who's the ice character from Overwatch, and like standing on top of it and having it.
Yeah. That's like a totally great way to use it also, because then you're like, ha, you can't get to me.
Right. Yeah. Because in the demo, and I guess early on, there are these like deer looking types of monsters, and they're on the ground, and so I would like whoop up on the thing and it'd be like, all right, now I can shoot at you, and then they're smart enough to run away when they realize that they can't get to you. I would assume that's intentional. Yeah. So that's really cool. But I didn't realize the depth that all of these things were going to synergize. That is really, really cool. And you also mentioned on your arm, you could see like the glowy tattoo. And one of the things that you've done that's very clever with this game is it's very minimal on the UI. Everything that you need to know, you can kind of see in your on-screen environment, which usually means like your bow, your quiver, your glowy tattoos. There's like, how does that all work? What are all the things I'm sure that's complex to communicate all of these things in a very minimalist sort of way.
Yeah, it definitely took a lot of iteration, but after like working on the Bethesda games for so long, I was like kind of burnt down on menus a little bit. And I'd always liked stuff like Dead Space, which had that like, they call it the diegetic health bar or whatever, where it's in world and it was on his spacesuit. And I just really liked the idea of doubling down on that for like as much as possible. And with the bow, like you have quite a bit of screen space there to like communicate different information, and tattoos seemed like a fitting thing with like magic and tattooing, and there's always a connection there. So I did eventually have to put in like some tutorial messages and stuff, because I did try at first what if I don't do anything, but then some stuff would happen. You'd go up to this altar and like press a button, you're like, wait, what? And you're like leveled up, you're like, I did not mean to level up. So
right
there are a few things that pop up menus, but for the most part, and as you're playing, all the tutorials eventually just kind of go away after you do it a few times. So really, eventually, it just becomes like the level up menu that pops up.
Yeah.
Because I just like that feel of being like actually in this world, experiencing it, not pulling up the map every 5 seconds, not staring at a HUD, not playing with your inventory for half an hour all the time.
Right.
Because I just want it to be a place to experience,
like actually be in the world, because that's the point, is to kind of get immersed in this unique setting. And let your imagination run wild, like hunt some stuff, get hunted, however that works. Okay, so let's talk about, let's go back to the Bethesda stuff. Is there an example of something that you worked on or something that you worked around because maybe somebody else was working on it that you specifically were like, oh, that's such a good idea, I want to use that in my game, or maybe I'm going to take that and tweak it in a different direction? You mentioned a little bit about these sort of things, but was there a creature design that you always wanted to put in and you just didn't get to, so now you're putting it in your game, or a mechanic that you're like, oh, that's really cool, I definitely want to keep doing that?
I mean, I think it's mostly the fact that it's just kind of like always been my thing, is that I'm ultimately like a horror person. Like that's one of the Easter eggs that's in Fallout 76. Some people might know this now since I finally explained what it was on Twitter, but there's the Sickle Man hut in like cabin in Fallout 76 where it's like Sickle Man was here, and there was like all these conspiracy theories about what it was. And when Wastelanders came out, I changed it to Sickle Man is here to just, freak people out even more. But what that actually was when I was in 5th grade, I wrote a bunch of like horror stories all the time. And one of them was about this guy with a sickle who would murder people. So it is in fact a reference to a childhood story of mine that my teachers did not like at all.
That's hilarious. I have a very similar story. An elementary school friend and I would take turns writing books. I mean, they're very short stories about Mr. Cute Face Squirrel. Mr. Cute Face Squirrel was supposed to be this horror character who was this little squirrel. I don't know if it was inspired by like the bunny in the Holy Grail or something like that, but it was this idea of this very sinister squirrel who would creep around campus and like sneak into the classrooms and like peek through the little panels on the ceiling or whatever. And then there was Mr. P, who was an actual teacher that I had. He did like science stuff in like 3rd grade or something like that. And it turned out that Mr. P was supposed to be the hero. Mr. Cute Face Squirrel was the villain, but it actually was switched. And Mr. P was like the psychopathic, like friendly teacher during the day who would hunt children at night and blame it on the squirrel or something. It was something dumb like that. But yeah, it was the same sort of thing because it was done in that like dun 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 kind of Scooby-Doo spooky kind of thing going on. That's hilarious. Maybe this is something more people do, is write these dumb stories as children and then turn into people who create things like you and I do.
I think that is totally true. It's going to be all this awful grade school fiction and comics, but eventually with practice, you can end up doing some pretty cool stuff. Yeah,
you kind of refine it into your thing. Yeah. So when it comes to setting up a scene, setting up something that's engaging to the player and is going to go for a specific mood or environment, how do you go about setting that up? Do you have something in mind and then you just kind of keep working on it? Or is it something where you just try stuff out and you go, oh, this really works? Or what's that process?
I tend to start with like mood board reference piles. Like I use this program called Pure Ref where you can just like lay out all these pictures. And so I just gather up all the different things. It has like architectural elements, weather, creatures, whatever, and just cluster them in all these different ways. And that's kind of how the whole game started. Like I don't write a lot of documentation. I'm not a big fan of it. I think it takes a lot of maintenance, often it becomes completely out of date. Mm-hmm. It's not a great way to communicate stuff. But I also don't really just like writing that way. So like the mood boards to me communicated a lot better. And
right.
Yeah, that just helps me capture the vibe. And then as a solo dev, making that actually happen, it's like this whole cohesive thing. So it's not any one particular thing. You're making all these decisions thinking about what is the weather going to be like? What are the colors? What is the music? All of it.
Mm-hmm. So do you get into, this is done in Unreal, correct? Mm-hmm. This is the engine you're working on. Do you start working on, say, like, let's say zone number 3, and then what do you dial in first? Do you start loading in assets? Do you load in the atmosphere? Do you change, like, I don't know how foggy it is or what the lighting looks like first? Like where do you go first?
I started first with just the terrain and some basic colors, and then layered in some like rocks and major features, and then weather after that. But then you just kind of loop over it lots of times to like get enough of it to be okay. Like,
yeah.
but not all the locations are there yet, right? So I just like put green cubes, like here's where a thing is going to be. Can I see a thing from this other thing? No, I need another thing in between. Put another green cube there. Eventually that's going to be a place.
Yeah.
So it's very much an iteration thing.
Yeah, I feel like, I obviously am a podcaster and I do some other creative things, but I also have written and played music for a very long time. It was one of those things that I tried to make a career out of in my 20s. But I got back into making music over the last few years, and it's the same kind of iterative process. It's like, I'm going to write a song. I need to start with some foundational stuff. So in your case, it's the environment, the way the landscape works, some of the objects that are in, maybe what the weather is going to look like. But for music, it's like, okay, maybe I lay down some bass and drums. Maybe we should see how this goes. What does this sound like? Do you feel like you need to actually see it in Engine in order for you to be like, okay, I saw it in my head, but now that I've put it into actuality in front of me, like for me, it's a lot about like doing a thing, seeing a thing, editing, seeing a thing, editing, seeing a thing, and then eventually getting to that spot. Does it work for you like that? Yeah,
because you end up changing things once the rubber hits the road, and that's why I mentioned I don't like documentation, right? Like, yeah, because I put it in, then I can just change it. And some of the areas that I have in the game look pretty different from if you go back and look. I did this initial world reveal trailer because I had done like a 6-month prototype of the game, and then I spent basically 6 months making the world. Mm-hmm. But since then, a lot of those have changed quite a bit. Like the weather looks completely different. There's like all these trees and stuff that weren't there, because playing it later, I was like, well, this isn't quite working. I think it needs this other thing layered in there, or that whole thing tuned completely different.
Yeah.
It's lots of passes.
It's iterative, right? Yeah. So you go through those passes, you start actually building out the way the levels and the mechanics are going to work. You play test it yourself. But when it comes to, and I get the whole play testing thing, you bring other people in, you get their perspectives on this. How do you know, especially when you're going for something with a very specific vibe, like part of something being spooky or scary has to do with a limited amount of knowledge you have about it. But when you're the developer, you have all the knowledge about it. So how do you know before you even send it out for playtesting that like, okay, this is going to be spooky, or this jump scare is going to work, or I don't know if there's jump scares specifically, but like, when the monster starts bearing down on you, you're like, okay, no, this is terrifying. Like, do you still scare yourself even though you know what the game and the engine is going to do?
I do sometimes. Like, even though I made that giant tree thing, and the fact that it has like footsteps that are basically as loud as explosions, and like your screen is shaking, like that thing still sneaks up on you. It like just blends in so well, because it's like it's tall as a tree and it's skinny. Because like lots of tree dudes and things, they're like kind of big and beefy, but yeah, most trees are actually skinny. So that's why I made it look like that, and that's why it continues to sneak up on people so well. Even though it has explosive footfalls, yes, it still comes up on you. Wow. That makes sense though, because if you see something in the distance and it's a skinny looking tree, you're less suspicious of it, because it kind of slow moving, right? Like a swaying tree. So it masks itself pretty well, but you don't know for sure what's going to work. So playtesting is always super important. Yeah. But it kind of reminds me of something I asked someone who was making a comedy game, like, how do you know it's funny? Yeah. And it's this guy, Jacob Janerka, and he made this game I really like called Paradigm, which I thought was hilarious. But he basically said, like, if you think it's funny the first time, you just kind of have to trust that it's going to be funny to other people later, because it's totally not going to be funny to you working on the game for years. Oh, right? Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's the same kind of thing. Humor surprises you. That's why it's funny, is that there's a certain amount of a surprise response to, oh, I get it. Like that sort of thing. And horror kind of tugs on that same thing of like, I think this is what's going to happen. Dear God, I didn't expect that. Or, nope, it's exactly what I thought was going to happen. I was more accurate than I thought I would be. Like there's still some element of like, okay, this is where we are now. I'm sure that's why horror comedy is a thing as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like Evil Dead. Like, yeah, my son is 14 now. He's in high school, and the other night we were just hanging out. His mom had some like work thing, and it was getting late. And he was about time to go to bed, and we finished watching something, and I saw the what's the third film? The Army of Darkness. I saw Army of Darkness pop up on the menu on Amazon or Netflix or whatever it was, and I was like, all right, this is a classic. I need to just show you pieces of this real fast before you go to bed. I was just like, look at this monster. Look how ridiculous it looks. I was scared when this came out and it was your age because I didn't quite get that this was like so tongue in cheek at the time. But yeah, it's like horror is a tricky thing. And something like that is both funny and scary in this weird sort of way. Or at least it was at the time. Now we look back on it with our modern eyes and we're like, oh yeah, those skeletons are moving at half the frame rate because they were done stop motion or whatever. So speaking of movies, is there influence? So we talked about Bethesda games and real world myth and folklore. Are there movie influences? Are there going to be any, like Fallout does this all the time. It references movies. Like there's all sorts of characters that are callbacks to things. Is there anything that's like a direct callback, or is it more of just like, oh, these are the kinds of things I liked, and so I'm doing something similar?
Yeah, I don't think there's like direct call outs in that way, because I feel like it wouldn't necessarily fit the tone of this game, but it is inspired by a few things. Like there's this movie, The Ritual, which I really, really like, you know, guys going hiking in the woods, hijinks ensue, monsters.
Right.
Fantastic movie. And there's also like this indie horror movie called The Headhunter, which I really liked. So all about one guy hunting monsters, and it has like this very low key presentation. Turns out the movie was made for like $30,000, which like blew my mind when I heard that, because it actually looks like phenomenal. It's like really good armor and prop work and monsters, very well shot. So I just like that it has a lot of the same kind of like mostly not dialogue based storytelling that I really like. And I also, you know, like there's lots of games that I pull influences from as well in that regard. Yeah.
Are there any like that really stand out from other games' perspective? Like not just Bethesda stuff, but you mentioned Dead Space. Like what else has been influential?
I actually just did a podcast interview just on this past week, and we basically spent 2 hours talking about why Shadow of the Colossus is so amazing, and a lot of the parallels in my game and that, and the way it approaches things, like the architecture and even the narrative themes of like the pursuit of power and how that's not necessarily a good thing. Like, killing the monster isn't always actually correct.
Right. Yeah. Shadow of Colossus came out almost 20 years ago now, if I remember correctly, maybe 20 years ago now. And it was what, PlayStation 2, end of PlayStation 2 era, if I remember. And it was one of those games where it was like one of the most beautiful games that came out on that system. It was really pushing the graphics. But for anybody who hasn't played it, you're hunting individual monsters. Each monster is like its own dungeon in its own way, where you have to climb up the monster, you have to find its weak spots. And it was one of the first games to really focus in on that. And by the time you get to the end of it, the general feeling is like, was I the villain? Like, right? So
very much
your game has.
Are we the baddies?
Are we the bad guys here? What is going on? So wait, are we the bad guys? I don't know if this spoils things, but in the Axis Unseen, are we the bad guys, or is it just kind of like?
I'll say there's multiple endings, and if you pay attention to what you're doing and what's happening to you, you might notice some things.
Okay, more mysteries. Okay. So Shadow of Colossus, I wouldn't have picked that as a major inspiration. And now you have me wondering about some of the other monsters I haven't seen yet and what those might be like, because the monster designs across Shadow of Colossus each one is a giant thing, but they're all very different in their shapes and movements and design and all of that. So, okay.
Yeah. I wanted to capture a little bit of that too, where a lot of the creatures that I have different mechanics involved in them. Like I added about 6 of them 2 weeks before I went gold, basically.
Wow. 6 new monsters right at the end.
Yeah. Cause I had been doing private playtests for like 6 months. And then I was like, you know what? I want some even more off the wall mechanics. And there's some monsters that like the private playtesters were like, I know it's there. It scared the crap out of me. Where is it? I can't find it because there's so many things going on and me playing with your perceptions that some things might not be what you think at all at first.
Oh, okay. Now I'm curious about how that's going to work. All right. I don't know how that works. I guess I'll just have to see. I'm like in my head, I'm like, what could that mean?
Yeah, you'll have to find out. But it was literally right next to them, like many times.
Huh. All of a sudden your bow becomes a monster? Is it something like that? It's like, oh God.
That's a good idea. Snake.
Yeah. So speaking of like you're adding stuff in real close to the end of launch, and obviously this is being a solo developer, it's like going from piloting a battleship at something like Bethesda to like, you've got your own little dinghy. If you want to turn around, you can just turn around. Like you don't have to get everyone on board with that, right? Like you can pivot and make changes very quickly. And by the time people are listening to this, they can go pick this up on Steam and just start playing it. Do you have already in mind ideas for future releases, expansions or sequels, or maybe the next project you want to work on after this?
I've tried to not focus on it too much, but it is a highly expandable game, basically. It was also highly cuttable. That's why I picked like a hunting game. Like if it did go poorly, I could have cut half the stuff and like still shipped something, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, if it goes really well, I could be like, oh, I could just add another region. I could add monsters that only show up at a certain time or whatever. I even have some journals written, and because I localized the game into like 16 languages, so I got them already translated too. So it's like, if it does well, I can finally put in that monster that I wanted to. Because at first I was like, I'm going to put in 12 more. I only got 6, but I feel like that's pretty good for like a week of work.
Yeah, holy crap. Yes, absolutely. That's a monster a day. Just like, wow.
Yeah.
Holy man. I just said holy man. That's a weird expression. So you have these visions. So is it just like a list of other monsters? Are there environments that you haven't engaged with yet? Or is it ideas for ways to play with the mechanics and create different like game modes? Have you considered anything like that?
I feel like all of those are kind of possibilities, because like the thing that I would point to the most as what I like what they did with it for like a single player game, instead of like the games as a service, like battle pass and grinding.
Yeah.
Instead, I like the game Hitman and how they did a lot of timed events and put out new game modes. Like eventually they put out basically like a roguelike version of it that was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that is the model that I'd like to emulate if I do, if it does well and it makes sense to do that. And, people also ask like, oh, are you going to do multiplayer? Like for starters, I'm a solo dev and it's already like for what most people would be like irresponsibly large game.
Right.
So I think multiplayer would have been a mistake. It's like 5 times harder to make a multiplayer game.
I'm sure. Yeah, there's a lot more. This is a common thing, and I see a lot of comments from my audience and people who are into Bethesda games and things like that. And there's kind of a running theme of, well, why don't they just do this? And it's like you've clearly never worked in game design.
Lazy devs.
Right. You've clearly never worked in software design or anything regarding that at all. You change one thing, you got to change a dozen things, and you don't know necessarily what that's going to affect. And so you're just opening this crazy Pandora's box of just possibility every time you dive into something like that. So it absolutely has to be very intentional. So for you, with the launch of this game, where are you currently at with, if you want to talk numbers, like how many people have played the demo? Like I know that there are wish lists and pre-orders and like what means success for you when it comes to this project?
So yeah, I can talk about that since I have posted some of that stuff on Twitter. So it's basically out there. Like so far, over 50,000 people have downloaded the demo.
That's great.
And the wish lists are at like 110,000 so far, but it's also going up like crazy fast. Like I had my game go viral on Twitter a number of times. I got like the No Clip documentary. So I had like what I considered pretty good exposure. But then it came to like this demo launch and like a big press push before that. And me doing all these Reddit posts and more or less everything. Yeah. But now the graph is like hockey sticked, like bonkers. And it is like the number 270th wishlisted game on Steam.
That's great.
Which is nuts because there's like 5,000 games launch a year or something now.
Yeah, it's an absolutely crowded market. And that's one of the things I think a lot of people would have told you a few years ago, because it was back then too. It's only gotten worse or busier, worse from the perspective of competition, I guess you could say. But I'm sure that was stressful. This idea of like, well, I guess I'll throw my hand in the mix and see if I can get some attention in this space that's extremely crowded.
Yeah. And like Steam Next Fest is going right now, and that has 3,341 demos.
Oh my God.
And last I checked, I'm like number 17. So it was terrifying though, right? Because I also decided to do the whole thing with no publisher or anything. So that means I'm not getting paid for 3.5 years, which is kind of terrifying. And you can do like fuzzy math on like wish lists. Like, well, if I have this much, I can probably expect this much, but you really don't know. That's why I say it's fuzzy math. That's why I was like, I'm going to try and get it as high as possible. Because what if I'm on the low end of that? Like you never know anything until you ship a game. And that is why shipping a game is hands down the worst part of making games. It is incredibly stressful, and there's all of like the outside stuff that then comes in with people bashing on your game. And it's like, criticism is fine, but some people are, capital G gamers and being super angry.
Yeah, we get it as content creators too. Fortunately, so many of the majority of the messages I get from people are positive. Hey, really love the show, like this kind of thing. But it's that there are people out there that are just miserable, and they just want other people to be miserable, and they just I just want to watch the world burn, so I'm going to tell everyone on this review that this is the worst game ever, or this is the worst podcast ever. And I actually got a review I called out a few weeks ago about somebody who listed things in their critique of my show, and I was like, none of that is true. That's really weird. I don't know if you're listening to my show, because that's what like
I can sympathize with that big time, because most of the reviews that have come out on my game now so far have been like really positive, but then there's this one that's like, oh, it's fun, but I wish there was more to it. Like, I wish there was more melee weapons. There are. And I wish there was something like unrelenting force in Skyrim, like the shout to push people.
Yeah.
Which is literally in the trailer for the game. So it's like, not only did you not actually play the game, but you didn't even watch the trailer. Like, this review is terrible.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. Human nature is just, it's tricky. It's tricky in a world like this is another dynamic. This is something that you absolutely have to deal with. And as a content creator too, but as a content creator, the concept here is making a thing that people are going to want to consume. So when it comes to, I'm thinking about the episode I'm going to do next week, that's a week turnaround. Like I've got a week to do the research, to figure it out, to really nail a perspective, an angle, something, and to put it out there. And I've got a pretty good sense of the kinds of stuff that resonate with my audiences. But when it comes to a game, that's a 3.5 year cycle. That's a 3.5 years ago. You were like, I think this is a thing people will want. I think it's a thing they'll like. And if I can do a good job with it and get it in front of enough eyes, people are going to go, that's cool. I will give you my money because I want to play that. That looks fun, right? But you don't really know for 3.5 years. That is a big risk.
Yeah, 1 week sounds amazing.
Yeah, right? Like each episode is like, well, I got a week. Let's see if I can figure something out. And if I don't do very good on that episode, at least I got the next one next week, and maybe I can redeem myself a little bit. But yeah, 3.5 years.
Yeah, that's part of why I announced as early as I did, because I was like, I kind of want to prove the fact that this is worth spending that much time on. And it did like well enough at the announce that I thought, extrapolating the numbers out, that it could do well. And I did enough market research, I suppose, to decide it was like an idea that makes sense. Because there are some genres and stuff that are really, really difficult. Like if you're going to do a side-scrolling pixel art game or like a puzzle game, like it's so hard to break out there.
Yeah.
But I felt like hunting games actually can sell super well sometimes, and just like nobody's talking about them. But like the Hunter Call of the Wild sells millions of copies.
Yeah.
But to me, I really love the mechanics of those games, but I was like, but it should have monsters.
Right. Where's my monsters? Where's my heavy metal?
Right. Because also there's so many metal heads out there. And like one of the biggest FPSs ever is a metal game, Doom.
Yeah.
So it seemed like, again, like this hole that was just kind of missing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So let's say this does really, really well. Let's say by the time people are listening to this and they're going to Steam and they're like, oh, this is in the top list. This is the top sold games this week. This thing's getting hundreds and thousands of, downloads and plays and all of that.
I hope so.
let's say it's a monstrous success, and you're like, by the end of next week, you're like, oh my God, I didn't realize this is going to do so well. What then becomes the plan?
I mean, I get asked that, and honestly, like, I really like doing this solo indie thing. Like, it's really cool to just be able to make games and focus on the art of it and not worry about all the drama of building things with a team. And because I do also got asked a lot, like, why don't I do a small studio? Because that has a lot of those same problems, but it can potentially be really amplified. Like, if you start a studio with like your best friends, you better be okay losing your best friends, because like that 100% can happen. If there is one weak link in like a 4-person company, you can be in a lot of trouble, or even potentially like tied up in legal proceedings for years. Like, it can be extremely messy. Right.
Because you have all of these people who are basically wagering their own ability to make income and provide for themselves on this endeavor. And so whether there's an accurate reason or not for them to be freaked out about a certain decision, how that's going to affect their future, all of a sudden that can create a rift between them and the other individuals on the team. And then things can just fall apart.
Exactly. I've seen it happen so many times.
Yeah. It happened in bands. Like I mentioned, I used to play music. Like this is one of the main reasons why bands only last so long, is because the individuals cannot agree on everything that they're going to do from a creative standpoint, but also from a standpoint of, this is how I'm going to make money and feed myself. So it becomes high stakes. And the little decisions become what seem to be big. No, the zone should be blue. No, the zone should be purple.
We've totally had debates like that too in projects too. Like, Istvan, Ilya, and I debated the color of blue in the sky in Fallout like hard.
Yeah. And these are things that players probably will never even think about. Like they look at the sky and they go, oh, it's the sky. And then they keep on fighting super mutants or whatever. Right. But like, that specific shade of blue was a decision somebody made, you know, like everything is a decision somebody makes. So, okay. So gauging into the future, you're still working on games by yourself. Is there a second title? Like, we've talked about maybe DLC and other things for this, but if you decide to move on to a second new game, do you have any sense of what that might be?
I have like a little notebook where I just write all these like single sentence ideas. It's not like design documents or anything. It's all like one line. And so it has a bunch of absurd ideas. I would likely do something, or maybe a handful of like smaller things before I do another big project, just to break things up and have a little fun. That's most likely what I would do, but who knows? I might, because I kind of intended to do that a little bit with this. I was like, I'm going to do some game jams and then pick a design that I like the most. And then I was just like, I really like this one. I'm going to just do this one.
I just know this is the one I'm going to do here.
Yeah.
Cool.
Just shave off a few months from the schedule.
Right. So in those future ideas, are you still going spooky stuff? You don't need to give away too much, but is it going to be something kind of in the same vein or something just completely different? Because sometimes it's nice to have a big change.
I think it would probably be in two camps. There would probably either be more spooky, scary stuff or just something like really dumb. Because I like stuff that is just like stupid and doesn't care and embraces it. Right, like I'm a big fan of Workaholics, Dumb and Dumber, Beer Fest. Those are some of my favorite absolutely stupid things. Yeah. And I think there's space in games for stupid things that people embrace. Like Goat Simulator did incredibly well, and that is 100% that.
Yes. Yeah, Goat Simulator 3 is actually Goat Simulator 2. But they named it 3 for some reason. That game is crazy. Or even little games like Duck Game. I don't know if you've played Duck Game, where it's just like a couch co-op shooter type of game.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Little ducks, but it's silly, like one of them can wear a bag on its head, whatever. There's definitely room for that stuff too. Well, Nate, thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad to get this insight into your mind, because I've enjoyed so many of the things that you've made in the past and where things are going for the Axis Unseen. And I wish you the best of luck. I hope this game does extremely well. And if you haven't wish listed it yet, or checked it out, or downloaded the demo, or heck, just saw it up on Steam, because it's probably going to have it's like 10% off launch deal. Is that something that's going to happen?
Yeah, 10% off for 2 weeks.
Yeah, so 10% off for 2 weeks. You can go check it out. The Axis Unseen. You can download it. You can play it. You can get your stealth archer, monster hunting heavy metal gameplay on, and definitely if you pick this up, let me know. Jump on the Discord, let me know what you think about it. Stream it online. I'd love to watch people playing this and see how they experience things different than the way I experience them, all of that stuff. So Nate, thank you for joining me. Anything else you want to share before we wrap this up?
Just that it also runs on the Steam Deck. Actually, a lot of people ask me because it's like high-end Unreal 5 stuff, and frankly, generally speaking, the Unreal 5 games that come out these days don't run on the Steam Deck.
Yeah.
But I usually test with it, so it's pretty flexible. I even have like a potato mode in the game if your computer's really old.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely check it out.
So yeah, chances are you'll be able to play it with whatever system you're on if it runs on a Steam Deck. So.
Right.
That's great. That's great. Well, awesome. Thank you for joining me again. And everybody, thank you for tuning in. While this episode comes out, I am currently out. I'm on vacation with my wife. I went to a big event that she's doing. We're currently probably somewhere in Germany or something like that. But I will be back next week with a regular episode. In fact, we'll have our patrons on when I get back. And I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time. See you later, everybody.
See you.